Okay, today I want to start on Unit 2, which is our first syntax unit for PHP. As I mentioned before I started the recording, there is on OneDrive a Unit 2 start folder, so if you want to follow this along, for those of you that are missing today, want to follow along at a later time, you can download that and simulate what we're doing in class. I've downloaded that, put it on my desktop, and now I'm ready to go, right? Why not?
You need to run XAMPP.
I need to run XAMPP. Okay, so here's XAMPP, and for some,
Apache.
and there's Apache. I don't need MySQL until we get to the database.
Yeah.
All right. And I should be able to close this, but it's not working very well for some reason. I don't know why. You do not want to quit. If you quit, then this whole application goes away, this icon goes away, and you really have no visual clue that it's still running. Normally, if you close, this icon will disappear, but that one will stay. But right now, for some reason, I can't minimize, I can't close, I can't do much anything to this, so I'm just going to park it. All right. Now I'm ready to go. Nope, why not?
You need to put into the root folder of your Apache.
I need to put it in my htdocs folder. Okay, so what I need is a shortcut to my htdocs folder. That probably wouldn't be a bad idea. So I'm going to open up my flash drive. There it is, 3, okay, or E. Here's my XAMPP folder. There's my htdocs folder. Anything you want to run using PHP has to be in that folder. It cannot be on the desktop, cannot be in another location. It has to be in this folder. Now, it can be embedded inside 4 levels deep. I could have a Unit 2 January 15 sample folder and then have stuff in there. That's perfectly acceptable, but it has to be, when Neil said the root, not the root of E, not the root of XAMPP, but htdocs. So what I often do is create a shortcut to this. I think I can simply drag this little folder onto the desktop, and it creates a link on my desktop. And I can rename it and just call it htdocs on E or something like that. And that way I don't have to go down to my computer window, open that up, find my E drive, find the XAMPP folder, find htdocs, and then finally find what I'm looking for. So this will take me right to htdocs. And so now I need to copy my Unit 2 done folder over to there, and then I can get started. I think I have, yep, I have those running. So here's my Notepad++. If you wish, you can use brackets. Remember, there's a portable version of brackets. Before class, I left myself 15 minutes to figure out how to use it on the Mac. That wasn't enough time. So hopefully by next time I can show you. I think I can do all of this without the virtual machine, which is what I'm trying to avoid. It just saves me a couple of steps having launched the virtual machine, put this thing in, etc. Yes, sir.
2 questions.
Yep.
In your opinion, would you rather use Notepad++ or brackets?
It's a horse apiece to me. Brackets has got some nice things because I can drag a whole folder in and have it open up. That's tough to do in Notepad++. Brackets has got some additional things, color coding, some syntax, but a lot of that stuff's in Notepad++. This flash drive that I'm grabbing for quick use here doesn't have brackets, so that's a good reason to use Notepad++.
Okay.
I don't have a big favor one way or another. I don't think whatever works for you. It's text, right, when you're done.
And then, I know we're learning PHP, but what else? Are there other things that we might want to look into job-wise that companies use besides PHP? I know it's not in this class, and there's probably 100 options.
Yeah, for the recording, Justin's question is, what else should I be looking into for web development, right?
Right.
How long are you going to be alive? There's a lot of stuff, right? Because we could try to figure out how to get Visual Studio to do PHP development. We can get Visual Studio to do ASP development. We can get Eclipse to do PHP development. You can do ASP. You can do Perl.
Not necessarily
Languages?
PHP development, but yeah, languages. Is there something that...
ASP is the other one that's very commonly used, but so is Perl.
Okay.
And Python is another one that's used. I said it mockingly. I didn't mean to. Well, yeah, I guess I did. But there's just too much to learn. You got to focus on one. and be confident enough in a job interview to say, I do web development using PHP. I've done Visual Studio work. I shouldn't have too much trouble jumping into ASP. It's nice to know what ASP is when you see it on a job posting, so that you can say, well, that's web development. I can probably figure that out. If you wish, look through the Murak library of stuff. You should have every one of his books and be an expert on all of it. It's tough when you're finding work. It really is, because Century wants one thing, Skyward wants another, Renaissance wants a third. Who knows what else is going on? So I've picked PHP because it's open source. ASP isn't bad, but it only runs on the IIS web server, and the IIS web server is just a pain. You have to literally install it in Windows, and you'll have to install it on your laptop, and it's not really portable. So from an educational perspective, it's a little rough. Plus, it's so much like Visual Studio that I think it's better to get a little different perspective on it. I could always say, if we have time, we'll look into it, but the first part of the time is installing IIS on all our virtual machines, and then so on. So yeah, there's a ton of other stuff, but that's, like I've been promising you, about 2 weeks after you leave here, graduation, start your new job, you can quit calling me, because you're going to be doing stuff I've never done. Can't help you. And you will, and you have the background. That's what we're trying to get here. Some concepts out of the way. You have the background. That is what will serve you best when you get that first job, and the willingness to learn, because you are by no means done learning. I think we're kind of figuring that out in the intermediate iOS class, right? I had a whole iOS programming. We should be experts by now. We've barely even scratched a fingernail of the surface, and there's a ton, and it's all complicated, and it's just you have to do what Sean's doing, I think, at his job, and that is figure out what it is you don't know that you need to know. And usually that's, I need a page that does this. How do I do that? Google, Wenderlich, books, other programmers. In his case, that doesn't work. And if that doesn't work, none of that helps, then you get to be the expert. You get to figure it out and make it work. But you can all do that. I've seen you do it. Definitely a challenge. All right, so I'm going to use Notepad++ for no other reason. It's available to me here. Clean out some of the other junk from last time, and open up the Unit 2. I'm going to start, I believe, with index. I'm going to go, first of all, to Firefox. How do I launch that page? Localhost. As long as Apache is running, that will connect you to localhost. And then I can find my Unit 2 done folder. And this looks like a form that's already ready to go. And the reason I created this form is when I show total weight, I'm going to show you how then transfer control from here to the results page. And then the results page is going to take the information from here. And that might be a little later in my recording. I feel like I'm a little ahead of myself here. We should just get comfortable with doing a little bit of PHP and make it do some stuff. So I think what I'm going to do to start with, and I might change my mind, leave that running in case I want to come back to it. Back to Notepad++. I'm going to drag the index file in there. Well, let's see what's in results. Good grief. Looks like it's done.
You grabbed the done folder.
Oh, that wasn't real good, was it? Well, no, but the done folder I'd created using the original folder that didn't have any exposure, and then renamed it done so I can put it up there as done.
Oh, because mine doesn't have that much.
Yours doesn't have that much stuff in it? What about the index page? Is it
Not,
No. there's
nothing
no
in index
PHP
either?
in the index.
just.
Cool, then I grabbed the wrong one.
HTML.
Okay, so let's see here. Oh, there's Unit 2. Okay, I'll open that one. See what's in there. So what did I do with Notepad? Oh, it's going to be one of those days. Bunch of stuff, and the form is still there. Right, but not much else. There's no PHP in here. Okay, so that's a good sign. What's in results? some starter stuff, and that looks like well, it's got some stuff in it. No, it looks like it's done. That's weird.
No PHP.
Oh, yeah, that's PHP. All of that's PHP.
Yeah, that's not
what you have in yours?
what came off the website.
No print.
Okay, I finally got the right version of everything here. This is the index file from the Unit 2 folder. And what it already has in it is a form that has images and inputs and error markers and all the stuff that we're used to. Number inputs, date inputs. Notice the names. Depending on when you took web programming, my naming standards have changed a little bit. IDs that are used by JavaScript have prefixes. So DTP, sample date, even though it's a text box, I still give it a DTP prefix. Number for a numeric input, number for numeric input, TXT. But all of my names do not have prefixes on. The names are what are sent to the next page when you submit your form. Now, this is kind of in the middle of the notes. We'll come back to it also a little bit later, but here's my form. Notice it posts. We'll talk about the difference between post and get again a little bit later. But notice who it posts to. That results page. So what we're going to see here is how do I get stuff off of a form onto another page within my same website. But when I do that, remember that I'm running off of my Apache server, so I'm really saying go back to the server, get the results page, send it this information from this page, and then do whatever the results page does. So we're ultimately going to see that. What if I want to see the results page directly? How do I do that? Can I go to localhost here? And there's localhost. Here's my Unit 2 folder. Notice when I clicked on Unit 2, what did it do? It ran this immediately. So there's no easy way for me to go jump right to the results page. Well, first of all, in this case, the results page is supposed to get input from the index page. So going to the results page directly is kind of bypassing our design here. The results page is not going to be receiving what it needs. But that may not be too bad. If for some reason you want to jump to a page, type it manually, results.php. And there's my results page.
You can also drag it into your browser
From where?
from just
From my computer window?
Yep.
From here into there?
Yep.
Really? Wow.
localhost.
But I don't know that it is localhost though. Notice it's running as a file and it's not doing any, I don't think that it'll do PHP processing if we do that. It's running right now, but if there was any PHP in there, my guess is the PHP is not going to execute.
We'll test it later.
But no, we'll test it now. Let's go to the results page. And after the header, maybe before this main tag here, let's add some PHP. Now remember from last time, to add PHP, you just put in a PHP tag, which is an angle bracket, question mark, PHP. And I go down a couple of lines, question mark, angle bracket. That's the end of the PHP. You cannot put any raw HTML in here. All you can put in a PHP tag is PHP. If you want to generate HTML, you can do that. We saw it last time using an echo command or a print command. Talk about those today as well. And echo the text that generates HTML, that you can do, but you cannot type just a straight image tag in here, for instance. It will not work. Okay. So inside here, let's type in an echo command and just say hello Volker type thing, or hello your name. Do you need a semicolon? Pardon me? We could put it in a paragraph, but I just want to see if it executes when I save this and drag it back in there. I don't even know if I need to drag it back in. I'm going to save that. Come over here, there's my results page, and refresh it. Now you know why I'm surprised. This was my first clue. It's looking at a file. It has no clue that this is running on an Apache server at this point. So if I go localhost in front of that, instead of all this htdocs stuff, do localhost, then my hello Volker shows up. Okay, so yes, you can drag, but all you're going to see is the HTML. The PHP will not process. All right. So that's a quick over. I'm going to use results just to get some stuff up here and then we'll either comment it out or erase it. Ultimately, we'll use all this, but instead of messing up my index page, let's mess up the results page and put some things in there. Back to my notes finally. Okay. To insert PHP, we can insert as much PHP as many times in as many locations as you want on a web page. I have some web pages that are nothing but PHP. You saw last time the index page for my books project. The index page is just one big, huge switch statement in PHP. But you can have lots and lots of tags. As I just mentioned, you cannot put HTML between there. You'll get PHP errors. Most pages have lots and lots of PHP tags. Many years ago, we used a book by Didle. And what Didle liked to do is create entire HTML tags, like this H1 tag, inside of an echo command. Now, Sheila was asking me about font size. You all right with the font size back there, Harold? Can read all this okay? Okay, that's why I moved Sheila up. That's okay. What's this? That's a PHP variable. PHP variables start with a $sign. All of them. And that's how PHP knows that it's a variable. You can embed that inside of a string. Yes. Very similar to what we did in Swift. But here I don't need the backslash parentheses stuff. You just put the $ thing inside here and it works. Sort of. We'll talk about that in a minute. The point is, Didle created entire HTML tags using PHP. And that's perfectly legal. Murak, however, prefers to use minimal PHP. So here he puts in the HTML, and then in the one thing that changes the variable, he uses PHP for just that little snippet. So he's got all these little PHP tags all over the place embedded inside his HTML.
It's gotta be hell. Yeah.
Not necessarily. The answer for those who didn't make the recording said that's got to be hell. Not necessarily. It's a little bit of a pain to type the $PHP and $ over here. But other than that,
It's theoretically less processing on the server.
And then for
theoretically, but we're talking short strings here, so that's not a big deal. Murak's philosophy is if we do it this way, then we can have HTML experts who know nothing about programming, very little about PHP, if anything about PHP, and they can develop beautiful websites because you and I stink at that, right? They can do the beautiful stuff and say, insert name here. And then hand it off to a PHP programmer and they can put their PHP tags in. Most web programmers can learn to do this, for that matter. Okay. All of this really, in my mind, is mute because as soon as we get to an MVC type model, oh my goodness, then PHP takes over. We can do both. Initially, for the first couple of units here, I'll ask you to do minimal PHP. It'll get you a lot of practice creating PHP tags, inserting them, so do as much as you can in HTML and put the PHP where things are going to be dynamic. So in this case, the H1 tags are just pure HTML. The welcome text is pure HTML. PHP is used to insert the name. Like I said, I'm not 100% convinced that I could, if I know this is going to be a PHP page, hand it to somebody who only knows HTML5 CSS and think that they're going to be able to do a lot of stuff for me and that the PHP can be completely isolated. I'm not 100% convinced. It's a good way to start. Some more syntax. Comments, like most of the curly bracket languages, you can do multi-line comments or inline comments. I'm going to fly through this. If you have questions, stop me. Don't be shy. Found that out yesterday. How many of you asked questions in the intermediate iOS class yesterday? Me. Yeah, a couple. But most of you went along, and all of a sudden at the end of class, poor Sean's working with each and a few of you trying to resolve your issues. Where were you before? And he asked me later on, why aren't they asking questions? I don't have an answer for that. So,
Well, till the end.
okay, that could be why. But, and plus, you know, I told him recording is going to help a lot.
You
All
go
right.
fast.
Here we go.
It's kind of like typing by your time and trying to.
Well, yeah, and I was trying to keep notes. This shouldn't be in the recording, but anyways, I was trying to keep notes and type what he was typing. You make a mistake in one, and all of a sudden you're 30 seconds behind, and that's a lot.
I think my suggestion.
Which is why I'm asking you, if you have questions or I'm doing it, it's not working, interrupt me. Don't let me keep going because you're going to be 5 minutes behind. It's just going to make it worse. I can pause the recording so that it feels like we made everything perfectly and nobody had any trouble, and that's not a problem. So, point is, if you got questions, ask them. PHP is case sensitive. So variable names are case sensitive, function names are case sensitive. Everything you see is going to be case sensitive. All statements end with a semicolon. Welcome back from Swift. Swift doesn't require, for Sheila and Kyle's benefit, doesn't require semicolons. We're getting used to not typing them, and then you come back here and I got to put them back in again. Curly brackets are required in Swift, and they are also required in PHP, like most curly bracket languages, if the body has more than one command. Many people don't care. They put the curly brackets in all the time. PHP supports 6 different data types: ints, doubles, booleans, strings, arrays, and objects. We're not going to mess with objects too much. We might get, well, I'll take that back. We do. But you don't declare variables. In JavaScript, we learned toward the end of web programming, I dug it out somewhere, that if you don't say var, when you use variables, they're automatically global variables, and that causes has all kinds of ramifications. So you have to declare, should declare them in JavaScript. PHP, you don't declare variables. As soon as you need it, you just throw it in there.
What level is it?
Depends where you put it. Right? If you put it inside a function, it's a local variable. Put it inside of a loop, it's probably a loop level variable, but I haven't checked that. If you put it outside of a function, now it's global. And then there are other, we'll talk about them in a little while, super global variables. Those are global variables, always accessible and always defined, always available to you. Don't even have to declare those, they're just there. Or don't even have to create them. What's the risk here? Don't have to declare variables. One typo, one capitalization error, and you got a new variable. And your program goes merrily on its way and crashes when you try to process that variable that doesn't have anything in it. We say, what are you talking about right here? Oh, geez.
Or it also means that you can't have a global and local variable in the same thing.
I'm not so sure. I wouldn't do that for the recording. You said you can't have a local variable and a global variable with the same name. I think that's perfectly legal because the local variable would override the global one. If you want access to the global one, we'll see global variables in this unit. They're actually special. For functions to have access to global variables, they have to tell you they're using them.
Okay.
So you can have local variables with the same name and there's no conflict. Because of that, because of what you're worried about. Well, if I already have one declared name out here and I declare another one inside the function, I doesn't know which one I'm talking about. Typically the answer is the local one. But in PHP, you actually have to explicitly request access to a global variable, which is kind of funky. So in PHP, you don't declare variables, you just start using them. They all start with a $, and after the $, you can have any combination of letters, numbers, and underscores. Again, case sensitive. Syntactically can be a real nightmare because you declare a variable and you know how you can stare at it for hours, especially those of you with size 7 fonts, stare at it for hours and not see that one of them is spelled differently. Receipt and receipt with the E first and then the I first, and they look perfectly good to you when they're this far apart and tough to deal with. What helps is the brackets and Notepad++ syntax highlighting, not syntax so much, but object highlighting. When I click on the word images, I guess it's not Notepad++, at least not this edition. I'm a little behind in my updates on this flash drive. But usually when you click on one of these things, there it goes, highlights the other ones. So if you have those kind of issues, here's your tip of the day. double click the first one and make sure the other one highlights. If it doesn't, you didn't spell it right or capitalize it right. So there's some risks there, but boy, it's sure easy writing code because you just crank out variables as you need them. Yep.
Is there an escape character if you want to use $sign in a string, or does it just automatically assume that it's not associated with a variable?
If it's in a string, it's surrounded by quotes.
Right.
So it's not a problem. Output. I've rearranged these just a little bit. I talked about calculations first, but really we want to talk about output first so that we can generate some stuff. We just did it. Generate output using either the echo or the print command. For our purposes, they're pretty much interchangeable. There are some subtle differences, but particularly if you do minimal PHP, there's no difference. In the echo command, you can use apostrophes or quotes around strings, either one. Remember, in HTML, you can use apostrophes or quotes around strings. You just have to make sure whatever you start with, you end with. And some of the fun stuff is when you're generating HTML with PHP, you generate a string of HTML, your PHP has quotes around it, so that means you're required, not exactly, but probably want to use apostrophes on the inside. Unless the text that you're putting in your HTML has apostrophes in it, then it, oh geez. It can get really complicated really quick, sorting that stuff out. So whatever we echo gets inserted into our HTML. So if I go back to the web page here, if I can get there, and look at the source code, did this last time, we look inside the source code, right underneath my header, this text got inserted. So whatever you put inside the echo gets inserted into your HTML at the location where you place it. Now in this case, I'm not creating very good HTML. You should try to create good HTML. Normally that PHP would be inside of a div or inside of a paragraph someplace. And I would put the paragraph inside of the HTML. Harold was talking about it. If I wanted to modify this slightly, I could say, give me a paragraph. If I'm doing minimal, the PHP does not include paragraph tags. It may. But using Murak's minimal PHP, I'm not sure even that's minimal, right? Because I could then say, hello, comma. And in this case, since it's fixed, Volker, I don't even need that. But this will have, I'm pretty sure, no effect on my results. So it's a style thing. You'll have to talk to your employer. In my case, I'm going to ask you to do minimal for a while, and we'll see where we go from there. Stuff to be echoed. You could put parentheses around it. I never do. Echo can spit out a list of values separated by commas. I've almost never done that. Usually when I echo, it's a small piece of text. It's a large piece of text. I concatenate stuff. This, by the way, is concatenation. We'll see it in a minute. Here's the print version. Normally when you see print, it's got parentheses around it, but I think I experimented with it in the latest versions of PHP, which is also always updating. Like all the other languages, latest versions don't seem to require even the parentheses, so the difference between echo and print, for our minimal stuff, is pretty rare. Print is a function. I think if you want to use it as a function and grab its return value, what does it return? Maybe the string that echoes. I've never used it, but Murak does talk about it. At least it used to be page 227 if you're curious. Unless you have a reason, I'd pick one. I tend to lean toward echo because it's 4 characters long instead of 5. It's easy for me to type. Print isn't bad. Pick one, go with it. Maybe if a couple of you try print, we'll find some differences, but they're pretty subtle. To do math, pretty much the same as JavaScript and C#, plus, minus, star, slash, %. The shortcut operators are all available. Here's a kicker. Integer division returns a double. Remember, that was almost a whole unit in programming logic beginning. Integer divided by integer gives you an integer. Chops off, not here.
So there is no integer division.
If you want to chop it off, you have to typecast it as an integer. We'll see the
Oh, it should be.
typecasting. Pardon me?
That's how it should be.
Okay. Yeah, but we have to go back a long way to figure out why C# does it that way. You're going all the way back to C, the C programming language. It's just trying to be consistent and maintain some backward compatibility, and that's always fun. Order of precedence, pretty much the same as always. String processing, as I mentioned, string literals can be surrounded or enclosed by either apostrophes or quotes. Murex suggests apostrophes. We'll see why a little bit later. It is possible for you to embed variables inside of a string. Very similar to what we did in Swift, except here it's even easier. You just throw them in. Because of the dollar signs, they're recognized as variables inside there. And this is back to John's question. Well, what if I want a dollar sign in there? Well, rarely do you want a dollar sign in front of a word, right?
You can use numbers for your variables too. So how does it?
No, not without the letter first.
Oh, the letter first.
I don't think you, well, I'm not positive, but I would never name my variable $1M. I don't think.
I'm just saying.
Don't do that. It causes trouble when you try to print them. Okay. So there might be embedded variables. If you use apostrophes when there are no embedded variables, like this example, right, Murex would say this is faster. Because of the apostrophes, when you surround echo commands with apostrophes, you may not embed variables inside. You may not. Syntactically, you can't. You can put them in there, but they just come out with $sign letters. Okay, they are not processed. So Murex point is, if you put quotes around this, the first thing that the compiler is going to do is look inside the quoted string to see if there's any variables in there it needs to analyze, and then process the string. Well, if there's no variables embedded in the string, then use apostrophes. I'm not a big fan of embedding variables in strings anyways.
If you didn't have variables in the string, then why would you echo it?
Why would I echo it?
Yeah, you just write it as HTML, right?
In this case, yes. Otherwise, it's maybe. Good point. Why am I echoing it? Well, I might not be echoing. Strings can be used for other things, right? I don't always echo my strings. I could be building strings. I could be manipulating strings. That's a little bit different. Anytime you want to, you can embed a string inside a quotation mark. I don't normally do it. I normally concatenate. If you wish to concatenate, you use a period. They were up here in the examples. My name is dot. That's concatenation. That takes a little getting used to, folks. Always throwing plus signs in there, maybe an ampersand occasionally, but that takes getting used to. And they're very subtle. My advice to you is put spaces around them. You don't put spaces around them, even harder to see. I think it's legal without the spaces, but I advise putting them in there just so you can see them, because they get hard to see. Again, size 7 font guys, that's tough. And you ask me to help you with it, I'm going to ask you to zoom in to about size 70 instead, where I can read it.
If I can add something to the apostrophes.
Yep.
For, you put a \n, so your HTML looks cleaner.
Mm-hmm.
If you use apostrophes, it comes out as raw text.
Yes, it does. That's coming up here in the notes, just next down the bottom of the screen there. That if you want to use escape characters, you have to use quotation marks versus apostrophes.
So apostrophe is basically text.
Pure raw text. Whatever you put in there is what's coming out. So if you have just pure raw text, Murex advice is use apostrophes. It'll be processed a couple billionths of a second faster. If you need to, for some reason, formatting numbers, you can do that. And by the way, I didn't mention we were talking about variables, that variables can change type. So you could bring them in as text. And then as soon as you figure out that, yes, it looks like a number, just simply multiply it by 1 or put it into a different variable. It becomes a number. You can, they're very dynamic, these variables. If we need to format numbers, turn them into strings. Here's my number. How many decimal places do you want? And it gives you a formatted text. But again, this is PHP. You multiply that by 1 and poof, now it's a number again. All right, so it's a different way of rounding. This does round. So this will give you a string with this value rounded to that many decimal places. That's optional. If you leave out the places, you get 0, not 2, 0. Talked about embedding variables. Here's what it looks like. I've bold-faced the name to make it stand out, but it doesn't look really any different, I don't think. So here in my PHP, let's create a variable called name and make that equal to, here's the apostrophes, right? I've just written really fast code. And now here, there's the hello. I can just echo the name. But if I wanted to put that in a string, and again, John's statement is, why would you put that in there? I'm not sure I would, except to demonstrate that you can embed variables inside of a string. Notice it is bold here, so it does stand out as a variable. If it doesn't go bold, it's because you forgot to use the quotation marks. You use apostrophes, it's not bold anymore. And as Paul pointed out, that's on the next line of my notes. If you want to use escape characters, \n, \apostrophe, which is how you get an apostrophe into apostrophe string, \quotes. The apostrophe / you don't normally use, because if you put it inside of apostrophes, I don't think it works because it's an escape character inside of apostrophe and it doesn't work. And if you put it inside quotes, you don't need the \.
What's faster, doing it that way or concatenating like you do?
I like to concatenate. I don't know about faster, but from a maintenance standpoint, for me, I like to concatenate. I use this for debugging.
But you don't
If it's my production stuff that I plan on using, I prefer to have string literals, concatenate variable. It's just a little easier from a maintenance standpoint, but you'll see everything all over the web. Yep.
After the hello and comma, sorry if you already covered this, but why is it putting in a space?
Probably because of the HTML, is my guess. Is there a space there? Interesting. Oh,
It just does.
it's kind of bizarre, huh? What if you don't want a space? How do you get rid of it? Now we get back to John's question about why wouldn't you put it all? Maybe that's one reason. My guess is that's coming from here. Is there one there? Oh, there's one there. I typed it in my HTML. Now it's not there. Does it disappear? No.
I bet if you move the PHP tag right against it, it'll go away.
That's probably true as well. There we go. So because the PHP was on another line, we got some white space.
Does it do it if you have a space in between the hello and PHP tag? Or you would, because then.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure if I put that space here, it will. Good question. It's another reason you guys ought to be asking questions, because you're usually pretty good with your questions and clarifies things for everybody, including me. I didn't know where that came from. Thanks, Reen, for telling me where it came from. Again, I don't use this much except maybe for testing. We can put escape characters in, and there are other ones besides these that you can look up if you need them, but this is the one we normally use. Start a new line so that our HTML, when we browse and look at the source, the HTML is somewhat structured and formatted so we can find our way through it. Try to figure out why it's not displaying the way we want it to. This works, there it is in my notes, it works inside of strings that are surrounded by apostrophes. So if you want an apostrophe inside a string and for some goofy reason you need apostrophes around it, it'll work. But in general, the escape characters only work when the string is surrounded by quotes.
I was just looking on Stack Overflow, and apparently they say it's faster to not concatenate and not embed it in the string either, but just write your text, separate your variable with a comma, and then do it that way. And it works. It's like
Your variable, separate your variable.
So I would say, I don't know what string you were using, but they have, well, quotes, but could be apostrophes, welcome, space, comma, and then $name, comma, and then.
Okay, so they're using echoes with commas.
Yes.
Okay,
And they
because
say
remember
that is
that's the
faster.
advantage of echo is I can do this. And what he's suggesting, at least according to Stack Overflow, is that's even more efficient. Now I've lost my space,
You won't need your,
okay, and then keep going.
I mean, period in there.
yeah, the period can go away after name.
No, because that's
No, 'cause you have
syntactically
hello,
English
welcome,
right,
period.
correct. Pardon me?
It displayed hello, welcome.
That's right. My results have a period in them. That's what that's for. That's another reason to not avoid concatenation. But I hadn't thought about that this is even faster yet. But again, what are we talking about here? We're talking about a server. That's a monster computer. And we're asking you to do a smidgen of things. We're talking about billionths of a second.
Although when you have 100,000 hits a minute, then it matters.
I'll worry about that when it happens.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's when you start reading that stuff in Stack Overflow and going, how can I tweak a couple thousandths of a second off of this?
They also mentioned that you can use brackets to.
Curly brackets?
Yes, if your variable is a list, you can like put brackets around $name,
Mm-hmm.
and then it'll list off multiples.
Okay. That's for arrays, right?
I believe so.
Yeah. We'll
Or
get to that.
objects.
Objects. We'll get to that. Okay, other string functions. Tell you what, let's take a break and then we'll talk about those.